What is the truth in the stories we are told? We've been given a story of a world fueled by separation. We've become separate from one another, separate from the earth, ultimately separate from the true nature of ourselves. It's time we learn the truth. It's time you rewrite your story. It's time to realign with who it is that you really are. This is the fifth dimension.
You are infinite and eternal. We are infinite and eternal.
Our natural essence, we could say, is simply being.
We have this awakening coming together as a perfect storm.
We're ready for this. We have the capacity inside. We just got to find that.
All right, we're on the air. And for today's show, I am joined by the one and only Alec Zeck. Alec, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for bringing me on. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went onto your Twitter yesterday and I was like, oh, let me go see if I can find some resources on it. And I'm realizing they're coming after you hard right now. Your Instagram went down, but they took your link tree down. Like, I didn't realize Linktree was censoring people. Like,
yeah, man, they're coming after me. I mean, it comes with the territory, right? Like, of doing and saying what I say, doing what I do. This is the second time that my Instagram has been deleted. So
onto that third account.
Yeah. Well, so it's a weird situation. I'm on my back. Actually, so let me back up. I'm on my original account right now. Like now, the one that I'm on Instagram is my account that I've had since like 2012. And I was using that one, only that one until around, I want to say September or October. I don't remember the exact date, but that account was deleted for like 3 days, 4 days. And I thought it was going to be completely gone as well. So I had made a backup and my backup exploded because I was deleted along with like 20 other people at that time. And I had no warnings on my account at that time, nothing, no warnings, nothing at all. And was just deleted. They reinstated it. So I continued to use it again, but then I made 3 separate posts on PCR testing that were not, like they were factually accurate. They were completely accurate posts, and Instagram didn't really like that. So they started shadow banning that account really bad. So then I was just using my backup, and my backup grew to be bigger than my original account, which is what I was primarily using. Yeah. And then that was deleted the other day. So now I'm back on my original, which is still kind of shadow banned, but it is what it is.
And then do you have another backup now too?
Yeah, dude, I have like 3 backups. I'm gonna keep going.
They can't silence you. They can't. They take you down once, you'll come back up going strong. People gravitate to it. But I think that kind of shows that it's difficult to silence the truth. Like, truth becomes self-evident, and people are going to find ways to get that information out there. So, I mean, I myself, I don't have a massive following by any means, but it's like, if my account ever gets deleted, I don't like feel personally worried about it. Like, censorship.
No. That was one of the weirdest things about even the first time when my account was deleted. And then when this time it was the same thing, like I mean, a lot of people were pretty like devastated because it wasn't just my account that was deleted. There's other accounts deleted. Right. People are and it is upsetting seeing that many people who are speaking along the same lines as me being deleted at the same time. But for me personally, I was like, okay. And then in many ways, there's almost like a relief. Because I've been sort of moving into a space of being so sick of talking about all this stuff, and wanting to really focus on like solutions. Because I think by now, if people aren't able to see what's going on, it's because they haven't had an experience that sort of shakes them and forces them to see or to question, or they're not naturally an inquisitive person, or they've never had to question authority for any reason. So it's like a need to have grace for those people and stop trying to like force them to see, and just say, okay, the people that get it now get it. We'll just go our way. And once those people fall or determine that they're living in a house of cards, we will welcome them with open arms onto our side, as we should. So,
oh, definitely. No, that resonates a lot because I've felt the same thing. Like, it's like, I could talk all about the Great Reset and the agenda and the things that are coming and the vaccines and this and that. And it's like, well, why don't I talk about solutions? Because if we're fighting these things and we don't actually have an alternative, then really what is the point? What are we actually going to do? There isn't necessarily anything we can do if we don't have a
friend
proposed
of mine,
alternative.
yeah, and a friend of mine, Sahel Shakiri, said a perfect analogy to me yesterday. I hope he doesn't mind if I share this. What he said with regards to this specifically, what you and I are talking about, it's like trying to rearrange the chairs on the Titanic while it's sinking. Like, there's, instead of playing in that system and trying to show people that it's wrong, or like, hey, like the ship is sinking, like yelling on the ship, hey, the ship is sinking, the ship is sinking. At some point you have to get out and go the other way, and then people will naturally follow because they see that you are living more fruitful, a more peaceful, a more present and aware lifestyle than they are. So
Right. No, definitely. And I agree. What has that sort of, making this shift? I mean, what has that looked like for you in terms of areas that you are focusing on in terms of solutions? Like, what has sort of resonated most in this space, as opposed to focusing on all the problems?
Well, and and then this is a matter of me taking my own advice that I've been giving for the past 6 months, because that's what's so tough about being involved with the social media space is I think so many of us lose the original intent of why we were speaking, or we get so focused in the mud and the muck of what's going on that we self-identify with that in a weird way, in a messed up way, if that makes sense. Because like, I sort of look at this as I originally started speaking because I was able to sit in full awareness, given my experiences that I've had in my life, and then the subsequent healing of those experiences. I was able to sit in awareness and say, oh, I really think this is what is happening. I perceive this to be happening. I'm going to speak on that and start speaking on that. And then as I start speaking, you get inside an echo chamber of just all the negative things that are happening. Like you said, the Great Reset, this, that. And it's like, naturally, I stopped being in a feel space and became in an analytical space, almost finding myself subconsciously trying to find the next way to formulate, okay, how do I get people to see this? And I would put that out there. Okay, what's another way to say this? What's a good analogy for this? And it can be effective, and it's okay to do that sometimes. But that is what, over the past few months, I have become. Rather than sitting in that original feel space and just observing and being, I've been so focused on analytically how to frame this. And I've been so in a headspace. And that is antithetical to what I want to be and to what I want my message to be. And I mean, we're human. We live and we learn, right? So that's the space that I'm moving back into, and I was already there, but I'm really trying to move back into now, is a space of really sitting centered in an awareness and in a feel space coming from the heart. Because if you lose yourself in the process of trying to help other people see, then what was the point? Right. And that's kind of what I've been doing over the last few months. I've been losing myself in the process of really trying to help other people see. And rather than just being, I've been doing. And I'm really trying to get back into the space of being. And with that, that's what I'm trying to help other people do as well, is really just be. And the core message behind all this is really getting people to shed the conditioning that we've experienced in this life, all the information that's been impressed upon us, what we've learned through the education system, the indoctrination, the programming on TV. That's why they call it a program. And really get back to what they see, know, hear, taste, smell, and feel internally, and go with their actual observed experience and how they navigate this life. And that's what I'm really trying to get people to understand, is that the more you sit in awareness and are in the present moment, you realize that there is no fear. There is nothing except for just being, just existing and experiencing. And you also realize that this is how we are supposed to be.
100%. That definitely resonates. And I feel like I've been in the same mode where I notice times where I come out of my space of presence. Like, I was able to observe all that's going on because I was present, because I was, aware from this space of being. But then you lose yourself in the process, and it's like, I need to do this, I need to do that. And it's like, we don't need to do anything. Like it's such a contradict or paradoxical phrase, because when you're from being, you actually do more, and it's from the heart, and it's
That's the best way to say it, dude. Exactly. When you are being, the doing that you are supposed to do naturally happens because you are being you authentically. Like,
right.
that is the best way to say it, man. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, and this is what I've, at the end of the day, what I try and keep coming back to as well. And I definitely get that. Even though you mentioned you feel like you've been lost in it, I still get that vibe from everything that you're doing, from the work that you're doing, and I think that's why it's so powerful and why I resonate with it.
Thank you. That's good. That's a good thing, because that's another piece that it's so tough. It's like, I hope my message is still somewhat clear, even though I have personally not felt in alignment as I should, because like ultimately I want people to be empowered to think and to really to just be and go with their own individual experience rather than what someone else is telling them to do.
Right. No, definitely. No, well, the message hasn't been lost. And I think it's clear that so many people, we're kind of seeing almost like a divide of humanity in a way, where you have the people who, and this is not said with judgment, like, said with compassion. Like there's a lot of like outsourcing of our reality, like externalizing just our own beliefs about ourselves. And we have our conditioning, and I come from a teaching background, and like I've looking back and reflecting, and it's like I really hope I encourage kids to critical think, because that's sort of what I've been all about. But there is so much indoctrination, and we don't teach how to think. We teach what to think, and
Spot on.
it's just all about acquiescence and giving up our sort of own personal sovereignty. And I feel like that's what the forefront of this movement is, where, health freedom in particular, body sovereignty. It's like just a reclaiming of our own inner power. And I think that's what's been lost most. And, maybe everything that's going on right now is sort of just a symptom of what's been accumulating over the past, really centuries, you could say,
Yeah.
of people not having sort of a connection to their own inner power. And then
exactly. And then this goes back with, like, I don't even want to say it's strictly the Western education system. I think it's like all education systems on this planet at this time. They're so compartmentalized, one, and then we're very reductionist in our approach to things. You think of like allopathic medicine, right? There's a like specialist for everything.
Yeah.
And there's no holistic, like, look at everything all at once, right? So with that, in the way we're taught in our education system, and then going into specialized areas of education, we're taught to only focus on our small area. And then when it comes to anything else, we outsource to a given expert in that field, right? And that's where it's interesting, because what happens when that expert is compromised, or what happens when that expert has been misled, or what happens when money gets in the way of that expert, right? And that's what we're seeing right now, is so many people are outsourcing so many areas of their lives to perceived experts. And I think for the people who've never been like for myself, I don't know how much you know of my story, but like being forced to question everything that I had been taught up to that point with regards to health, and really the nature of reality and trauma and healing from trauma and what I experienced as a child, all of that sort of coming to a head and being forced to question all of it. Once you start questioning, you start seeing the house of cards that you are living in yourself, that you have built around yourself and the way you perceive reality. And then when that all comes crashing down and the inevitable dark night of the soul, you're forced to either continue to build another house of cards or build a solid foundation of who you authentically are and what your authentic perceptions are. I think a lot of the people who are struggling with what's going on, I think I already alluded to this a little bit, is that they have never had to question their parents. They've never had to question their school system, anything. They've never had an experience that has shaped them, sort of forced them to question that which they have been taught to accept or to believe. And again, I want to have grace for those people to understand and that's what we're going to see right now with the rollout of this experimental product. We have no idea what the long-term effects will be, and I hope they're not bad. I truly do, obviously. Yeah. But if they are, that is the path of those people, and that will be something that will help them see. And that's the reality of it, that people need an experience in order for them to see many times.
Right. No, definitely. And I agree with that as well. Cause like I sort of had a wake up call, if you will, when I realized that uh, my last year of college, before going into it, I took this like trip to Costa Rica thinking it was with the school, thinking it was going to be like this like vacation or party. And it ended up being like a deep inward, like reflecting, like a mindfulness trip. And I'm like, holy smokes, my whole like idea of self is just a complete fabrication. Like it's all a lie. And so,
Wow.
and just having that like wake up call since then, I've been very much just the ability, almost returning to an inquisitive state, and allowing experience to come out. And I think I look at small kids and children, right, and they're naturally intuitive, they're naturally questioning things.
Yeah, man.
And so I think people just very much get strayed from that path. And it's like, if we're going to bring this out and what we're moving towards, that's something we shouldn't uh, condition out of kids, make them obedient, make them listen to authority. If we keep them in sort of their natural state and we build the foundation from very early on, then that's sort of the paradigm I think we're trying to shift into.
Exactly.
But you're right in that people sort of need that wake up call. And it's tough because I don't see what that can be besides something that is like, I hope too, a lot of my family has taken the experiment, we'll call it that. I don't, and it's like, I hope they don't get injured. I hope they're all right. I hope they don't have adverse reactions. But it's like, how do they wake up to this other that there is more, that this is all built on sort of a fabrication?
Well, and that's what, and this is where we're seeing the like the, how do I put this? The extreme form of outsourcing critical thought and outsourcing our lived experience to those experts above us or authority figures above us. Because like, I've been asking this over and over again when it comes to this experimental shot that so many are lining up for, and like, to each their own. If someone like truly has genuinely looked into all of these things and determines somehow through their perceptions that is best for them, absolutely. At least you've done like internalized and made it your own thought rather than someone else's. And like,
I agree.
the thing that I just cannot get by is that it doesn't stop the spread. It doesn't stop you from getting the infection, only prevents symptoms. And even with that, if you actually read the clinical trials for yourself, you will see that they used absolute risk in some places and relative risk in others. So like, as an example, I'm going to use basketball, right? This is the best example that I could come up with to explain this. In order to show that the vaccine was 95% effective, what they did was they compared relative risk, and they had, I think, the placebo group, and the control group was 40,000 people. And then the people who received the actual vaccine was also 40,000 people. I don't remember the exact numbers, but what they did was, in one group, after the shot, they had 128 people test positive for COVID. And then the other group, they had 60 people test positive for COVID. And remember, both groups had around 40,000 people. So when you compare them against each other, you can say, yeah, this one's 95% effective when compared to the placebo in a relative way. But when you compare it absolutely, like, okay, you had 128 out of 40,000 versus like 60
Right.
out of 40,000, and it reduced one symptom. That's what the endpoint was for the clinical trials. And it's like, if you're choosing the best free throw shooter on your basketball team, right? And you have both dudes shoot 40,000 shots. You have one dude that shoots 100 or makes 128. You have one dude that shoots 40,000 and makes 60. Okay,
You're
yeah,
not doing
he made
well.
60 more, but it's still not good. And then you add on top of that it's an experimental product. And then you add on top of that it has no long-term safety data. It's never been tested for fertility. It was really only tested on a healthy population of people. There's just so many things that like this is all factual information. And that's what's so crazy about this is we're seeing the conditioning on such a level that people like myself who are sharing factual information that is verifiable, if you literally go read the clinical trials for yourself, are being censored, and everyone, and it's in everyone is being told that we are sharing misinformation or disinformation, like actually intending to deceive people, which is just truly unbelievable. It's crazy. And it's like a weird balance of like, I've been so frustrated at that, but also at the same time, it's just like, it's not surprising considering how far we've gone with this lack of critical thought and outsourcing any critical thought to experts.
Right. No, definitely. And I'm not surprised either. I do feel frustrated, but it's like, I'm not surprised. And it's, I feel like, especially with the idea that there is no long-term studies, we don't know what this is going to do. And it's like, we look at just looking at the survival rate of the virus itself. I look at that and I say, well, 99.98% live through the virus. Why do we need any sort of shot jab intervention? Like it's, and the other day, the studies came out saying exercise reduces the risk of COVID and healthy eating. And it's like, no, it's like, wow, the gym bros have been saying that since last March. Like, come on,
dude.
So it's like, but it's starting to point to the fact that this holistic approach, and, I see people talking about in the mainstream, like, oh, the people who are quote unquote anti-vax, which I don't even resonate with that word. I think using it
it's a ridiculous word.
Yeah, it's completely misguided. But
it's a euphemism just to say someone who actually cares about choice. That's it. And that, like,
right.
or to like, yeah, that's
right.
all they're trying to do.
Right. But and they're kind of trying to paint the idea that someone who is quote unquote anti-vax doesn't care about health and is reckless or whatever. But I'm noticing, as I'm engaging in these circles of holistic health, the people who are choosing not to, get the jab, get the experiment, are taking such an approach of health that seems so above the current medical standard, above the current paradigm. Like like you talked about earlier, holistic medicine, you're looking at the whole body, you're eating organic foods, you're not just diagnosing symptoms, you're looking at the root cause. And it's like, these people are not what they're being portrayed as. And so it's, and I've tried to take that approach on myself this past year in particular, and I've noticed a huge difference. I haven't gotten sick. I've been feeling great. I love going out in the sun. I like just life is really good despite all of the chaos. And
that was a big shocker for me, man. Like when so Kelly Brogan, who I think of anyone that I know within the holistic health space, Dr. Kelly Brogan and Sarah G get torn apart the most on media, in the media. It's truly absurd. Painted as anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorists spreading disinformation, intending to deceive people. And what's crazy is I witnessed my own mother be perpetually ill to the point that she almost died multiple times under traditional psychiatry, right? Like in and out of mental hospitals, definitely not getting better. No one ever talked to her about trauma that she had experienced. No one had ever talked to her about her diet, any of those things. Just here's multiple benzodiazepines and SSRIs, just like mix and match, try them. Oh, that one didn't work. Well, cold turkey cut you off that one, start a new one. Like just absurd, man. And then I see her step out of that system, find Dr. Kelly Brogan, and become healed really within a 4 to 6 month period. And then you look and you see this doctor that really empowered my mom to heal herself and step away from like giving her money towards this system. And you look on the internet, right? You just Google Dr. Kelly Brogan, and what do you find? Pseudoscientific, quack, conspiracy theorists, spreading disinformation, intending to harm people, trying to make money off of this stuff. There's just so many labels. And when you see that, and then you take that same approach that you used with, or you saw happen with your mom, and then you do that with my wife, right, who had been diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis when she was 15, and had been struggling for 10 years at that point on multiple immunosuppressant drugs, on hydroxychloroquine, oddly enough, and a bunch of other medicines that led to more symptoms and side effects that led to more medicine, and just the perpetual cycle, seeing multiple rheumatologists. Try that same approach with my wife, that pseudoscientific quackery approach, and then my wife completely heals and has been in remission for 5 years. And it's like, that's what I'm talking about with the experience, right? Like, you see through your own lived experience two people adopt this pseudoscientific quackery approach to health that the mainstream consistently tears apart, and you see them heal. And Kelly's not in it for herself. She's truly in it to help other people. And you see that and you're just like, wow. And then on top of that, right, you see people like my mom and my wife who have healed, who are sharing their experience online, trying to help other people see, and then they're censored. They're labeled as a quack. They're labeled as a conspiracy theorist. They're taken offline. Everyone's attacking them. There's articles coming out that have come out about my mom. And it's like, aha, this is what this system is designed to do. You see it and you can't unsee that.
Right. No, definitely. Once you're awake to it, you can never go back to sleep. And it just kind of goes to show, when you start asking the right questions and you see the lived experience, you can start to pin the motivations of what this large system is. And, I think most people just don't have the motivation to ask their question or the reason to ask the questions. We've been painted to believe that this system is working for our best interests. So there's no reason to question it. There's no reason to think that there could be malpractice, and it could just be, it's funny because I used to joke about all the time with friends, like, and you say it passingly, like, oh, there's too much money in getting a cure for cancer, for example, or so people sort of have this knowledge that big pharma isn't on their side, but
so many people,
right. If you ask that question like a year ago, like even now, you could say, do you trust big pharma? Most of them would probably say no. But now it's like, when the time comes and there is this pinnacle moment, it's like, okay, do you trust big pharma? It's like, yeah, line me up. I'll go get, I'll go get the shots.
Man, it's absurd. But I think this all boils down to, again, just like I said, the experience piece, and then parentifying these authority figures. And again, if you've never been forced to question those things, it would be so hard for someone who, outside of an experience that makes their house of cards crash down, like what happened in my own life. Like, if you kind of pull at that house of cards a little bit, like they know intuitively because they feel the wind shake in their house of cards and they're like, oh, like something is definitely wrong here. And that's when you like talk to someone, you say, do you trust big pharma? They're like, no, I don't trust big pharma. But they have built the entire fabric of how they perceive reality inside that house of cards. So when you try to pull one out and make them question, they get pissed at you. And that's just the way it is, because that system that built the house of cards for them, that they have built all of their livelihood and everything that they've established themselves inside of, it's too much for them. And that's, again, why it takes an actual like life altering, sometimes really traumatic experience for people to begin to question. And it's so tough because it's so necessary to have grace for those people, but also balance that out with not allowing someone to impose their will upon you. And that's the other piece of like my core message is, I fundamentally believe, and this is a spiritual thing for me, that we are all one being, and being all one being expressing itself in an infinite number of unique ways, right? Like different points of awareness or consciousness expressing itself and exploring itself in infinite and unique ways. So the worst thing that you can do with that is, with your consciousness, impose your will onto that of another. But also the other worst thing you can do is allow someone to impose their will upon you. Because I think it is so important for growth and for soul development for each of us to truly authentically express as we are, with love, and not impose our will upon that of another human being or another organization. So that's what we're seeing with this. It's like the balance of having grace, right, for people where they're at and their understanding. But the moment they say, you need to go do this for me, for my health, so that I don't have to be afraid, that's where the boundary is drawn with love. And you say, no, I will not do that. I love you. And I understand through your perception. I have understanding of why you see it the way that you do. I totally get where you are at, but this is where I draw the line, and I will not allow you to impose your will, your way of thinking onto me.
Right. No, definitely. And that really resonates because, I think boundary setting is one of the, like when I started, I have that very much same sort of core spiritual principle in my own life. Like the way you put it, beautifully put. I couldn't have said it any better. But
shout out to Garrett Kramer for that one.
You know what? Garrett Gray, I had him on the podcast, and we
He's
talked about
awesome.
that. We talked about that very thing.
He's a mentor of mine. Garrett he's a phenomenal human being. He's
Yes.
really been a blessing for me this last year.
Yeah. Oh, I've definitely been resonating, and I'm so glad. I think I found him through your page. Actually, I think I saw like on your Instagram story, you posted his message, and it was
quick story. This is just how like how reality works. So it was one day that one of my friends had told me that like their friend had seen one of my posts and started following me. And I was like, oh, who is it? So I started scrolling to see who had followed me that day. And I just see this man that's older than me with white hair. And I like stop and it like catches my attention. I'm like, oh, I wonder who that is that like started following me. So I click on him, and the first two posts that I saw, I don't remember what they were, but like, you know, when you just know someone gets it, like at the core level that they like get it. I saw like two of his posts and I was like, wow, like this dude gets it at the deepest level. So I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I don't really know who you are, and I'm sorry if this is awkward, but thank you so much for following me. I just found you randomly by clicking on you, and I resonate with everything that you are saying. And then since then, it's just been back and forth, and we've built a good relationship. So
yeah, he's fantastic. He does just get it. Like I was thinking about earlier today. It's like, what are some of like the accounts that have most really like I've learned from this past year, and just in the past few months, his in particular. I see his posts every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
It's cool because he's one of those people for me that it's cool. It's turning into like talk up Garrett Kramer.
I know, right? Yeah, seriously. I'm gonna need to put his Instagram account in the episode description.
Yeah, seriously. So he's been one of those people for me. Like and it happens to each and every one of us, and even Garrett would recognize this, is like when I get knocked out of awareness, or I have a situation that like I'm back into my conditioning, right? I'm back into that which I am not at my core. He's the person that I call, and he is so good about remaining for the most part. And again, he would acknowledge that he gets knocked out of balance sometimes too, but remaining in that deep understanding that we are all one being, that all of us exist within the whole, that nothing exists outside of it. Right. And he's so good about remaining in that. And that's why what he says is so powerful. And he's been such a fantastic mentor for me, because he's able to help me see why these things are happening, and why fear arises within you, and why these experiences happen. And he's great. So anyone listening that doesn't follow Garrett Kramer, he's a must follow.
Need to. Absolutely. And, I think his message, and this message that, we're talking about, when you're centered in that, in looking at everything that's going on, I think it allows you to really get that bigger picture understanding. And you can, there's nothing about what's going on that comes off as surprising, or comes off as, for me, being grounded in that, I'm able to see the whole picture. I'm able to really not get angry at people's conditioning, not get angry if someone, wants to, has a, like I see, like on Twitter, for example, people tweeting about like cutting off their family members who don't want the vax. And I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's so sad, but I recognize where the fear is coming from.
100%, man. And like, that's the difference that I was talking about at the beginning, of the analytical versus the feel space. Because when you're in the feel space and you're truly in that feel space, you have compassion and understanding for why people are the way that they are. Does it justify it sometimes? Like if they're trying to harm you? No, it doesn't. But you understand. And because you have an understanding, you don't allow that fear, that anger, that frustration to overcome you. Because you get it. You understand why they perceive it that way, based on their experiences up to this point, based on their conditioning, based on them continually watching Fox News and CNN every day and thinking that that is reality. You empathize with them and you understand where they're coming from. So that allows you to remain more centered when you're in that feel space.
Right. No, definitely. And I think we recognize that we are beyond our name. We're beyond our labels. We're beyond all of the sort of outsourced external conditions that we've really just been given. I mean, we don't even choose our name. Like, you're Alec, I'm Evan. Like, I didn't choose Evan. You didn't choose Alec. As far as I know, it's like, all of this is just sort of given to us. And we recognize we're all coming, we have our unique expression, we all have our unique abilities and upbringing and talents and purpose and, you know, life that could be living in this self-actualized state if we're able to see past the illusions, see past the conditionings. Like there's a higher calling, you know, I truly believe that for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, but when we're stuck in our ego, which, you know, serves us when we integrate it properly, when we're stuck in our uh, just illusions of who we think we are in this
Yeah.
house of cards, we're never able to truly get past the fear in a lot of ways.
Yes,
Like it sort of,
dude.
it runs us, it controls us. And,
Exactly.
you know,
Exactly. And that's like, again, really, really the core of my message now is to get people sit within awareness within themselves outside of fear. Cause like in the present moment, again, there's nuance to everything. So like if you're currently being stabbed in the present moment, that's probably not a pleasant present moment. But in nearly all cases, right now, here in the present moment, you are safe, you are okay, you are able to breathe, you are here right now, and everything is okay. And I mean, I've had experiences, I'm sure you have too, Evan, is like the past 8 to 12 months where I've succumbed to fear and like so fearful about, oh my God, what if this happens? What if that happens? But the reality is here right now, we are okay. And then that's the other piece of this. And this is like getting on my Joe Dispenza vibes here is that like the more we can sit and be okay right now and experience the feelings of love and peace here right now, the more that we bring about that into our own lives. And this is the other thing that I want to touch on too, is I get questions a lot of like, what do you think is going to happen in the future? Like, how dark is it going to get? What's like, is it going to be like this? Is this going to happen? Are we going to be enslaved? You know, are we not going to be able to own anything? And my answer to that, and this is truly one that has come with just sitting in awareness, is the future will bring whatever we collectively choose for the future, and then also what we individually choose. And there's a distinct difference between the two, because if the collective, because obviously our ability to bring into being something collectively is extremely powerful, right? Like look at the computer that we're talking on right now. I mean, our iPhone, these microphones, humans thought this up and then created it. Right. And then collectively, like what we have created with cities and everything and the technology we've created, some good, some bad, like we brought that into being. So our ability to manifest things and bring into being things that we focus our awareness on are so powerful collectively. But even if the collective chooses a path that is very dark, you can individually choose a path that is very bright and beautiful for you. So even if the whole fucking world goes to shit over the next like 5 to 10 years or however long, you are able to within yourself really bring into being that is something that is beautiful for you, that is existing simultaneous to this darkness that everyone else is involved in. So that's what's so important, to align our thoughts and our feelings in love and in peace, and take deliberate action from a heart space on that peace to bring into being what we want.
So beautifully said. You know, ultimately our perception, where we are at, is what's going to create our reality. Yeah. And, you know, we have a tremendous impact on the people we surround ourselves with every day, with our community. And in turn, what is the community has an impact on your state and, you know, and the people the community interacts with. And it just keeps sort of going up the ladder. So if you're bringing out inner peace and you're sort of creating that domino effect, you know, that in itself is enough. You know, it's sometimes I think it's like, I wish I could do more. Like I'm sort of in that fear space. It's like, you know, I wish I could do something and snap my fingers, and it's like, boom, all of this comes crashing down. And it's like, we wake up tomorrow and none of it really exists. But it's like, that's not an actual like reality per se that we can just do. Like we have to just ground ourselves in inner peace. We have to ground ourselves in this space of conscious awareness, love and compassion. Love thy neighbor, even if they want to jab you with a pointy needle. And, you know,
there's a lot of that lately, right?
Seriously. And, you know, and that will bring about that shift that I think we both are working towards, that sort of higher calling, that purpose, that paradigm shift. And it's crazy because I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Like, you know, it's I've been thinking a lot about how this idea of like, there's a lot of people who sort of just want to return to normal, which is why they're getting the vaccine, which is why they're, there's that yearn for what was once lost, but I don't think that in itself is ever going to return. Like that,
No, man. Well,
it,
then that's the other piece of it. Like the way in which we were living prior to COVID, was it good? Was it
no,
beneficial for individuals or the whole? No, it wasn't. And so it's like this is where the phrase "the new normal" obviously carries a very negative connotation to it, right? But it
right.
can be transmuted into something beautiful, where there is a new normal that is beautiful for everyone, right? Like if we collectively, again, align our thoughts and feelings through a heart space and take deliberate action towards something that we want. The new normal can be something beautiful. And that's the other piece, is that any new normal that requires a vaccine is not a new normal that I want. Like that's not normal. That's so far from normal, man.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think this idea of a new normal that we could work towards is the empowerment of all the individuals, like we were talking about, the reclaiming of inner power. We've talked about that, respecting the individual differences and expressions. There's been so much divide and conquer, and so much self-identification with labels that that people view anyone outside of their own label as to be feared or like an other, and I think that's especially true with vaccines are becoming a part of people's identities. But we see it in the past with other concepts, nationality, race, all of that plays into the same idea, the divide and conquer. We just sort of need to recognize that we're beyond those labels, and we can create a society that promotes opportunity for all, self-actualization as the birthright, abundance as a birthright.
And that's what we're seeing too, that like I want to say, like, because you're spot on, is we have people that self-identify with the vaccine, no question, like a lot of people are. But on the flip side, dude, there's also people that are self-identifying with like the anti-vax, like the resistance perspective, and what that's just as bad.
I agree.
It's like self-identifying with that, rather like what I've been saying to people lately, and I'm sure my perceptions will shift on this like 6 months from now, and that's the whole point, because this is like a paradoxical statement, is that self-identify with the exploration, self-identify with experiencing. A good way of saying that is I am that I am, and self-identify with that, the creator experiencing its creation through you and co-creating through you. And when you self-identify with anything, especially ideas and concepts that are always subject to change, you're in for a rude awakening. And that I sort of found that within myself. I've been almost obsessing again with that analytical headspace on the true nature of virology and like virus isolation. And that got me to a conversation, which we'll be releasing on Health Freedom for Humanity within the next week with Stefan Lanka, who's a virologist, right? And he's currently showing through his experimentation that the methods that virology uses, the cell culture experiments, are essentially pseudoscientific, because he's conducting control experiments on them right now, showing that it's the conditions of the experiment causing the cell to fragment rather than the actual infectious material that they present to the cell. So he's showing at the core that is like completely fraudulent. And I've really been, in a way, self-identifying with that because of my original exploration of truth. But I've been like, oh, this is it. And almost to the point when people like get mad about it or like won't explore it for themselves, I get so irritated with them. Like, just look at it. Like, again, self-identifying. And that's knocked me out of balance. Whether or not there's truth to it or not, and there is a lot of truth to it, self-identifying with an idea or this versus that is going to lead you down a path of inner discontentment, I guess.
Right. No, definitely. But I think it's natural to do. I mean, I have the same thing where it's like, I resonate so much with an idea or a concept, or I think that this is what's going to wake people up. And when people don't want to like even look at it, you get angry. But I think we naturally tend to do that because it provides us like it provides the ego with comfort. It provides us with a way of, something we feel is a sure thing or assurance, when in reality, It's the great mystery is all that is. We can never have assurance.
Brother, when I left that interview with Stefan, right? Like, and we had a 2.5 hour conversation. I'm like in the middle of editing it right now because he's very passionate about German new medicine, which is yeah. So we had to cut out like 35 minutes of that because we just wanted to focus on like the viral isolation piece. But when I left that interview with Stefan, I was like, oh my God, this is it. Like, I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. Like, everyone needs to read this. And then I calmed down for like 45 minutes and I actually had a feeling, and this is what I'm talking about, of feeling like upset, like, oh my God, like 99.9999% of the world is up here in the depth of the, like, how, like, the fraud that is everything that's going on. Like, this is down here. If people can't see up here, they're never going to see this down here. And again, because I was self-identifying with that thing, I was so let down in my realization that, like, even if we put this out there, and we're going to put it out there, and it's going to help some people that have been breaking through some of the layers, it's like people aren't going to see, you know what I mean? There's just no way, even if this information is factual and it is out there. And that's where, like, that is really what is like propelled my shift back to my heart space, is like, I think I've, for my own self, gotten to the full depth of the exploration of this thing. And I've been self-identifying with that thing. And now I'm realizing that if I self-identify with that, 99.99999% of the people in the world are going to be, quote, against me in that perception. So that's really what propelled my shift in an odd way, is like getting to the truth of this as I perceive it, has made me get back into a space of, okay, like, I'm going to put that information out there. I'm going to share it, but like, most people are probably never going to look at it. The media will probably write a piece on him again, saying that he's a virus denier. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
No, and I think that's a really good point though too, because when you self-identify, and I think I've seen this over the last couple months, if you self-identify, oftentimes you prevent yourself from exploring further. Like, if you think that's the final, the final like piece of information, well, how do you know if you're too rigid in that? Maybe you'll miss the next thing that's supposed to come along if you're just sort of naturally exploring.
And this is a perfect example of this, because like, I, again, in the virus isolation piece, have like I was going pretty hard on it for a few days on my Instagram. Like, you probably remember, I was sharing a bunch of Stefan stuff, sharing it all over my Telegram, on Twitter.
Yep.
I still share a little bit of it because it is important.
It's still good info.
To explore, right? Yeah. But I shared it, and then one of my really good friends approached me and was like, Alec, yes, like, no question, the experimentation that shows that viruses cause disease is inherently flawed. But do you know for certain that viruses don't cause disease? Because I've been on this like camp of like, oh, germs don't cause disease. It never causes disease. I don't fucking know that. And that's what I'm saying. I'm self-identifying with that without like, and I'm limiting my own exploration because I'm so sure, right? Like, I was so sure, like, oh, germs don't cause disease because this one experimentation, which again, very pseudoscientific, definitely does not show that germs cause disease. But that doesn't mean that the flip side is true without exploring it. And we haven't explored it. We haven't really done enough experiments, or virologists and microbiologists haven't done enough experiments to definitively show whether they do or not. We do know that the evidence is clearly not there when you get to the depth of it. The evidence that germs cause disease is clearly not there. But that doesn't mean that they don't. And there's other mechanisms that need to be explored. And I was so focused on like, oh, this is it. This is it. I'm self-identifying with this. And that limited my own exploration, which is why I made that one post before my account got deleted: absence of evidence, not evidence of absence. Because that's, you're spot on, man. I was limiting myself there. I was limiting my own exploration and growth.
Right. Well, I think it's, like I said, it's a natural thing to do though, because, you know, if I find a piece of information, or if I leave a podcast where it's like, I came away with something that just completely blows my mind, sort of the basis of my being transforms into that idea, into that ideology.
Yes.
And it's because it's so groundbreaking. But and you know, I think that's why the journey, it's so infinite, and it's so like, there is never an end point, but sometimes it feels like, oh, I found it, but it's, you know, I think that's what causes people to get stuck or stagnate. And you could look at the very top of all the people who are up here. It's because they're just self-identifying with Dr. Fauci, with CNN, with all of this and that. So it's a cycle that just, perpetuates like naturally within us to want to attach ourselves to certain info or certain a new something new. I think we love new shiny things, but we
Yes.
love comfort, and it can provide sort of both. But that stagnation and true suffering comes when we hold on to it for too long.
Agree, man. And that's the this is such a subtle difference. Rather than self-identify with that which you have explored and that's what you have experienced, self-identify with the act of exploring and the act of
Mm,
experiencing. And that is such a big difference. And people get too pushed to self-identifying with those things that they have already done and already learned, rather than with the learning, with the experiencing. That
mm,
is the key, because when you
right.
do that, you're open to being questioned, you're open to being challenged, because you're continuing to explore, you're challenging yourself, because you're just continually taking on new information from all perspectives, and you would never deny or suppress that which challenges the things that you have experienced up to this point if you identify with experiencing.
Definitely. And, I personally love being challenged. I love getting in conversations and hearing other points of view, because everybody can be our teacher. Like
Yeah.
even if somebody has a view that is completely like so wrong on like so many, like factually wrong on so many
Yeah.
different levels, and they're just coming at you, but you can still learn from that. It's like, okay,
Dude, yes.
I recognize that perspective now. I see it's like, why would I want to silence that? Why would I want to push myself away from that? And
I had an interesting perspective, or an interesting thing happened just on that, like 3 weeks ago. We were at this birthday party, and I met this guy, and you could tell he was very similar to us, like very questioning of like everything that's going on.
mm,
He had like a sacred geometry tattoo, so I was like,
mm. He knows. Yep, that's the giveaway.
okay. So I was talking to him, and I told him about our organization, Health Freedom for Me, and he's like, "Oh, that's really cool." The first question he asked, like right off the bat, was like, "What do you feel about people that want to be euthanized, like that want to die?" I was like, "Oh my God, this is what I had never like experienced before." And he really challenged me on that, just like right off the bat. And I really appreciated it, because I had never thought of like, as it applies to health freedom and the ability
Mm,
to do like what is best for your health, people that want to just end it for themselves. Like, how do I
mm.
stand on that? I was like, dude, I have no idea. And it was such a cool conversation. And I think if I was a person that was so identified with like this aspect of it, I would have just been like, oh, like that's ridiculous. But I genuinely appreciated the conversation. I still don't know what the answer is to people.
I was gonna say that's a tricky one. I don't know if I'd have an answer to that. I mean, that's fantastic though. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess that's a compartment of health that is not necessarily on the forefront right now, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's valid.
I was just, whoa. Right off the bat.
It's valid. But and I think with this exploration process, the first, like, maybe people are listening to this and they're resonating. It's like, I want to explore. I think a good like first step is just exploring the self. Like, there's so much out in the world around us that it can be overwhelming to like want to go. There's so many different rabbit holes you could just infinitely fall down, and it can be overwhelming. But
Yeah.
I think the exploration of the self, like the question of, I posted this on Twitter yesterday of like, who, like, if you ask, who am I? Like, outside of everything, outside of name, outside of conditioning, outside of your job, financial status, your race, religion, like, how do you answer, who am I? Like, what does that look
Yeah.
like? What does that sound like? What does
I
that feel
love
like?
that tweet. I retweeted that one. That was so good. Yeah. Spot on. And I think with people, starting with the exploration of self leads you to naturally, and that's why I kind of said at the beginning, outside of an experience, it has to be someone that's willing to question.
Mm,
Like, if you haven't had an experience, then you must be someone that's willing to question for you to begin to see things. And that starts with sitting and being present and being the observer of your thoughts, and really going like, okay, why is it I think that way? Or when an experience happens to you, why did I respond that way? What makes me respond that way? Really asking like those questions of yourself, and really getting to the root of, just like you said, who am I? Not what do I do, not what is my job, not like my family. Who am I at the core of my being? Who am I? Like that is the ultimate question. And that is what makes people be open to experiencing reality in the nature in which you and I perceive it.
mm. Definitely, definitely. And I think when you come back to that, there's that recognition, like you're saying earlier in the podcast, we are all one, like we're all one being. When you get down to the deepest levels, we're all made of the same energy. Like we're all sharing in that commonness, like the commonality. The core foundation is the same. There's no
Yes.
separation. Separation is an illusion.
Yes.
Just
Exactly.
we come off as physical beings, but in reality, we are something much deeper than that. And
Mhm.
that's when there isn't the need to judge, and there isn't the need to impose beliefs, like you were saying earlier. And I think one of the first things that I've like when I was on this path was I was be able to recognize judgments. Like that was something, right? Like even before going in depth and like looking at healing certain things I still needed to heal, but my interactions with others is what is first improved when I sort of took a spiritual approach and sort of had this awakening in a sense. And it's the recognition that there is no need to judge per se. And it's
Exactly, dude. And I don't know if you're familiar with the law of one.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what like it's going to be hard to explain this, but so the law of one for the people listening is a channeled material, and then like the fundamental principle behind the law of one is that we are all one being, right? Like kind of what I alluded to earlier. And in our spiritual evolution, individually as individuated points of that oneness, we go through what is called the densities of consciousness. And as human beings right now, Ra says that we exist in third density consciousness, and we are evolving to fourth density. I think some other people would say this is what's called like 3D to 5D. I
Mhm.
don't typically resonate with that whole thing. I'm more of the third to the fourth. I don't know how he skipped through both.
No, I
But
agree.
and to each their own, which is totally fine. It's really all saying the same thing. But the point is, in order to effectively go from third density to fourth density, positive polarity, because there's different paths. There's positive and the negative path. The positive path is in this reality right now. We are here to learn true love and acceptance of ourselves and of other or perceived other, right? Because it's all one being. And that's the next step in our spiritual development, is truly loving and accepting other people for who and what they are and where they're at in their lives.
Mm, right, definitely. And I do feel like that is the sort of, if we even look at this, not just on an individual level, but at a collective level, I think more and more people are doing just that.
Yeah.
It almost feels inevitable to me that that is going to be the next step in our evolution at a collective level. Like that feels like, if we look back at the history of humanity, people have, we're technically in the most prosperous time in human history. And now the 10,000 plus years we've been around, we're in the most prosperous time. We've always have sort of evolved.
Mhm.
And I think this mindset that we've been living in, almost this sleeping to our spiritual nature, that has existed throughout human history. But I think now it feels like that paradigm is beginning to shift. And because we've almost reached this pinnacle of physical material existence, the next natural step is going to come evolutionarily in our spiritual growth, in our expansion of consciousness. That
Dude, spot on. And it's like this tension of like this label versus that label. Like you see people with like just labels upon labels of like identifying with those things, and it's just so tense, and we're like all just like all over the place, man, identifying with materialism. Just like it's getting to a point of like imploding. and
mm,
and and that's where like we're in that like tense dark night of the soul collectively, where things are imploding before our very eyes. And I think it's because of our self-identifying with all these things, with materialism, and really reaching, just like you said, that peak of living in this material world, and identifying with it, and the labels. I mean, dude, how many people do you see now that have like, and not hating on anyone that does this, that just have so many labels in their bio, if you get what I'm saying, like
yep.
I'm this, and this. And it's
Yes.
like we're reaching a point where that is all imploding before our very eyes. And then we're realizing that this perception of separation that we are all self-identifying with in different ways is not conducive to being whole individually and collectively. And that's all imploding. And naturally what'll birth out of that is us coming together, or that this is what I'm aligning my thoughts and feelings to create, coming together to realize that we are all one being. Because could you imagine, Evan, if each of us fundamentally realized, again, not believe, fundamentally realized, stripped away all the belief and realized that we are all one being, and that we are each of us are unique, holy temples for the divine. We would never treat ourselves or other in a way that is antithetical to that. All of that would cease to exist. And that's what we're going towards. And it's dark. It's dark right now, and it's going to be dark for a little bit. And it might get a little bit darker here. But just like you said, and just like I've said in this podcast, is that within that darkness, we can create a beautiful reality for ourselves. And that's why it's so important to remain open to the people who are experiencing darkness and always be welcoming of them, because they're going to be reaching points too amidst this darkness where they will realize, I see now. And then we welcome them back into our perceptions and the way we're living with open arms.
No, definitely. Before, the simplest of metaphors is that, it's dark before the sun rises every single day. So it's, and with that, there's so much unknown. There's so much mystery. There's a lot of wanting to, cling to the idea of what's going to happen next and live in that fear space like we were talking about. And, there's certain doom and gloom mindsets that we can adapt, but there's also just, we can cultivate faith in that knowing, there's a knowing that, for me, that truth always becomes self-evident, always wins out, I guess you could say, even though I don't think it's a competition necessarily, but truth always finds its way, and then the light always shines, and it's going to manifest itself. I think the reason we're seeing all the darkness is because there's so much light radiating from people. That's why so many people are able to recognize it, and it's becoming contagious, like we were saying. So it's, I look back at like where we were 1 year ago, where there was very few people even questioning the narrative, and looking at what we got now, and it's like we got whole tribes and communities of people rallying together and recognizing this like heart space consciousness. We're all one being, going past the illusions, seeing through the veil. I'm incredibly optimistic from that place. Like there's just this knowing, like regardless of whatever darkness is going to come next, like our being is infinite and eternal. So why fear at any point? That's where I'm at. And
Dude, exactly. That's a good way to express it. And it's like again, that goes back to identifying with the experience, and the act of experiencing is the most important thing. And like, that is what we are here to do. We're here to experience. And ultimately we are here to recognize that the moment contains love, regardless of what is happening in the external circumstances. The moment contains love, because that is what we are at our core. We are love. We are consciousness manifest through love as us. And that is what we are here to do, to be love experiencing.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That fills me up with like just joy and optimism, because it's like it takes me just
me too, dude,
to the deepest place of like, this is what I know my being is. Like, I don't need to feel any other way. So we're at about an hour, man. I feel like that's a really great place to leave the listeners with. Hopefully they're feeling a little bit inspired, empowered. I feel like this could have just kept going on probably for hours and hours on end, because we're kind of coming from the same place, same wavelength. So where would you want to send the listeners to interact with you? I mean,
hopefully by the time you publish this, I'm not deleted.
I was going to say, maybe you'll not be on the social media airwaves by the time this goes out there. It's going to go out in like a week, but you never know what happens in that time frame.
I'm being kind of careful on my Instagram right now, like a little bit. So I'll say, go to my Instagram, and that's alec.zeck_. And then the other one, just in case that's gone, and I recommend you get on this as well, is my Telegram. And that's The Way Forward, and forward is spelled FWRD. So the Telegram URL / The Way Forward FWRD.
Right on. Cool. I'll put those in the episode description bar. I know the Telegram will be there. If the
Yeah.
Instagram's not there and it's not in the episode description, all the listeners know what happened. But
Don't
if
forget
it's
Garrett Kramer too. Garrett, throw him in there. Basically, if I'm off Instagram, just follow Garrett Kramer because he like says a lot of the things that I try to say, but much better than I do. So,
well, I feel like if he was engaged in the conversation we just had with us, it would have been everything that we said. He would have taken it to a whole nother like dimension because
almost to where like you and I would have been sitting there like what, like
opening up new doors of
yep.
pathway. Oh my goodness. Well, awesome, man. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. This is a lot of fun. I mean, we'll definitely have to plan on doing it again in the future. I think we're moving in the right direction. So
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me on, Evan. This is great.
Yeah, not a problem, man.